All right, so let's talk about the cell cycle. The cell cycle is the time in a cell's life from the point that it is made to after it has finished dividing. So now it's actually split into two cells. And then each of those cells goes through the cell cycle as well. So the cell cycle is split up into two major sections. So I'm going to draw this in a circle to represent the cycle. I'm going to start right here. And the first one is interphase. So actually it takes up about 3/4 of the cell cycle, and all of this is interphase. This is when the cell is growing and preparing for division. Okay, so this is growth and preparation for division. Okay, now that actually gets split up into 3 smaller sections, but first let's look at the other major section of the cell cycle. So about 3/4 of it is interphase, the other quarter is cell division. Okay, so then we have cell division. Cell division will also get split up into 2 separate sections, and then one of those sections gets split up. So we're looking at each subsequent categorization, if you will, regarding all of these phases. So with interphase, again, this is the time when the cell is growing and dividing. It's split up into 3. The first part is called G1. Okay, so you have G1 phase. You also have the S phase, and you have the G2 phase. So G1, S, and G2. G1 is really where the growth happens. This is when the cell matures and performs all of its normal functions. So if it's a nerve cell, it's sending messages and receiving messages. If it's a muscle cell, it's contracting and relaxing. If it's a heart cell, well, heart cell is muscle cells, so they're contracting and relaxing. If it's a skin cell, it's doing what it needs to do to protect your body. This is when the cells mature. Now, there are some cells that actually have no interest in dividing unless there's some sort of trauma or injury. And so once a cell has matured, sometimes it'll go into something called the G0 phase. This is a resting phase. So it might go into G0. The resting phase is really just the time when a mature cell is doing what it needs to do. It's not planning on dividing at all. It's just doing what it needs to do. Your brain cells, neurons, are in the G0 phase. They're really not dividing. They're not planning on dividing anytime soon. Your liver cells also are in the G0 unless there's some sort of damage or trauma to the liver, and then that prompts liver cells to start dividing. So we actually talked about one of the necessities before a cell can divide is DNA replication. That's this S phase. So this is replication of the DNA. Remember, we have to have 2 copies of the DNA so that 1 copy can go into each of the new cells. And then the G2 phase, also part of interphase, the G2 phase is the final prep for division. Okay, so there are some organelles that have to be made, such as centrioles. Centrioles have to be prepared for cell division. That's particularly in animal cells. But also you need more mitochondria. Cell division is a very energy-intensive process. There's a lot of things that have to be done and finalized in G2 before the cell can actually go into division. Now, within cell division, there are also 2 parts, and those 2 parts are separated a bit like this, where you have mitosis here, and here you have cytokinesis. Okay, there's not much room to write it. Cytokinesis. So we've got mitosis, which another word for mitosis is karyokinesis. And you should already know what karyo means. That refers to the nucleus. This is when the nucleus splits, or the contents inside the nucleus splits, and that would be your DNA. And then after mitosis, you also have cytokinesis. And remember, cyto means cell. So this is when the rest of the cell divides. The cytoplasm, the organelles, they split up relatively equally between the two new cells. Okay, and then once cytokinesis is complete, you have two daughter cells. So now you have two identical cells. Remember, they are identical because with DNA replication, you made another copy of DNA. So they have the same copies of DNA. And remember that interphase is made up of 3 different segments. You've got G1, S, and G2. Don't forget, some cells can enter the G0 phase, which is a resting phase. That doesn't mean that they're not doing anything, it just means that they're not planning on dividing. They are doing whatever it is that their job is. So again, skin cells have a different job from muscle cells. Those have a different job from nerve cells. Once a cell does go into cell division, it undergoes 2 parts. The nuclear division is mitosis, and then the cellular division, which is cytokinesis. Now, mitosis is actually split up into several sections, and I'm going to save that for the next video because I think it's very important for you to have the diagrams for that one. So watch the next video for mitosis.